3, 4. Let me tell you about PuckPedia, stats, contracts, and caps. It's all there for you. One-stop shop for your hockey information. It's a hockey sensation. So log on, log on, log on. If you give a puck, go to PuckPedia.com.
Welcome to PuckPedia Cap Central. It is Thursday, April 9th. I'm your host, Keith Kavanaugh, alongside Hart Levine. Hart, how are you doing today?
Doing well. We're just 4 games away for most teams from getting to the end, and it's amazing how we know almost no matchups. Like there's so much still up in the air. You know, people trying to plan out maybe where they want to travel to follow their team or whatever. It's like just what we have basically one matchup we know, that Minnesota,
just the juggernaut in the Central.
Yeah, that one, Minnesota Dallas, and what else do we? It's pretty amazing how it's going to come down to it. So curious to see what kind of rest guys get down the stretch, or teams really playing their best lineup all the way through game 82.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because like in the wild card 1 spot seems to be like locked in place in both the East and the West, but even still you don't know which of the top seed in the Metro or the Atlantic or the Central Pacific, how that's going to play out, because like the Pacific, I mean, all 3 teams could essentially win that division or finish third in that division. You have the Atlantic, Buffalo and Tampa could kind of flip flop. It looks like Montreal's pretty solidly in third place there, but like the Metro, it's really just Carolina and then probably Pittsburgh in the second, but then any combination of Philly, Washington, New York Islanders are still in the mix. Yeah, a lot going on here. We had a couple coaching changes as well, or one coaching change over the weekend on Easter with the New York Islanders relieving Patrick Waugh of his duties and then hiring Peter DeBoer. And then a couple of days later, the New Jersey Devils made a change in their front office, relieving GM and president of hockey ops Tom Fitzgerald. So just kind of a crazy sort of ending to the season here. I was looking at our friends over at hockeystats.com. So for the Western Conference right now, playoff probabilities, basically the Kings are about 50% for that wild card 2 spot. Nashville's about 40%. And then like San Jose's pretty much out of it at this point, especially with that loss last night to the Edmonton Oilers. But looking at the East, right, all 3 Atlantic teams have clinched. The Metro has only one that clinched so far. Pittsburgh's about to clinch tonight when they beat New Jersey, who lost Luke Hughes now for the rest of the season. They got eliminated on Tuesday. But I mean, Boston has a good lead on wild card 1. They're not firmly like locked in there, but they're around 97%. But then Ottawa's 87%. We have Columbus about 26%. And then Detroit, Detroit's only 5%. So that's a tough one, considering where they were about a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
Islanders hovering 11%, Washington 6%, Philly 67%. So Philly, Pittsburgh could be a really good matchup there, but a lot to determine in the next few days.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in that West wildcard 2 spot because it reminds me of the Daryl Sutter quote of like, we could make the playoffs and it'd just be a waste of 8 days to go against Colorado, right? Like that, he was talking about Colorado that year too. So, especially like a team like Nashville, like of course you'd like it's money for a couple of home playoff games, but like, are they better off getting a better pick and, starting a proper rebuild? And LA, like are they going to reload and try to keep building to go for it in the summer, or are they going to take a step back too? It seems like both of these teams, maybe would be better off with the draft pick instead of, getting knocked out in 4 or 5, maybe 6 games against Colorado. So I get anything can happen. It's hockey. It's a frozen ice with a rubber thing bouncing around, so you never know. But I mean, obviously, we'd be shocked if one of those teams could knock out Colorado or even give them a long series. So yeah, just like what's actually best for the franchise? Like, is it those a few home playoff games, or is it getting a better pick and turning the page?
Well, I think best too. Like ownership will always take the playoff revenue over what's necessarily best for the hockey long term. And at that point too, right? If you're kind of battling for that last spot, you get what, the 15th overall pick versus the 16th or 17th if you're bounced in the first round.
That's
so
true.
Like the difference there, if you're not in the top 5, like I think it kind of falls off after that. So I think from that standpoint, it makes a little more sense to push for.
That's a good point. Maybe it's not the pick; it's more like going into the summer. If you think of your playoff team, it feels like you have to kind of keep going for it. If you miss the playoffs, whether you finish 1 point out or by more, it's like we missed the playoffs. Maybe now we have to take a hard look at things, and are we really building up, or are we kind of on the way down that we have to address that, right? So maybe it's more like the mentality heading into the summer.
Yeah, I look at Vancouver as a perfect example of that when they 2 years ago like made it into the playoffs, won a first round matchup, I think against Nashville maybe, and then lost
Yeah.
in the second round, and then they were like, oh shit, like we're actually kind of a good team, and we should kind of
We're good. Yeah.
we're good, and we should kind of build towards that. And then you look at now, the wheels have fallen off. They got rid of Quinn Hughes, and they just have to do a full reset right now. Um, but yeah, I'm excited. Obviously, playoff hockey, great time. So that can kind of lead into our first topic of the day here, and that's the newly implemented playoff salary cap in the CBA. So if you go to puckpedia.com, great website if you haven't heard of it before, but there's some good articles on here. So this one breaks down the playoff salary cap, exactly how it's written in the CBA, exactly how it will be implemented this season. I want to touch on a couple things, but Hart can kind of dive into the nitty gritty and the weeds on it. But essentially, how it works is all the dead cap charges are still kind of charged on your salary cap. You have that $95.5 million ceiling. And essentially, it's who's rostered on a given game day is what you have to be cap compliant. So it's going to be the 12 forwards you dress, the 6D, or if you go 11-7, and then your 2 goaltenders is what counts on the cap. So anyone who's a healthy scratch does not count towards the salary cap. There's nuance with how retention is calculated and the proration of everything, and depending on if you were the retaining team versus the team that received the retention. But Hart, yeah, why don't you give us a little bit more kind of the nitty gritty on this playoff salary cap and how you think do you think any teams will be in trouble and kind of make some interesting moves to make sure they are cap compliant?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. You did a great job explaining it. It's basically it's similar to the regular season, same cap number. The difference is it's only the players that are dressed for the game, whereas as you know in the regular season, it's all the players that are on the NHL roster that count. In the playoffs, it's only as you mentioned, the 18 skaters, 2 goalies that are dressed. And in terms of dead cap charges, it's all the dead cap charges the team had that year. So if they had buyouts on their books, if they had bonus overages from the year before on their books, all of those are going to use up part of that playoff cap space, that 95.5 in the playoffs. Those use it up. If they had players that were buried for part of the year, so that player with a large cap hit that was in the minors for however much they were buried and had a cap charge buried in the minors, that's going to count. So a team like, let's just say like a guy like Justin Hall, for example, right? And if Detroit made the playoffs, he was in the minors a lot. So however much that buried cap charge was while he was in the minors, that would be on Detroit's like playoff cap hit number. And then with retention, the team that retained, it's similar. Like if they retained for part of the season and they were charged for that retention, that's what would be on their playoff cap. Now, the big wrinkle I would say is that unlike the regular season where everything is prorated for when a player was added to the team, in the playoff cap, it's just the full annual cap hit. So if a player is a $5 million cap hit, whether he was added on to start the season or he came at the trade deadline, he's going to use up $5 million of that playoff cap. So that's where teams that, accrued space and added guys at the deadline, they don't really get a benefit of that. That the full cap hit of that player is going to be on the playoff cap hit. And
can I chime in real quick on
Yeah.
that too? Like, I think that might be some of the reason why we saw a quote unquote muted trade deadline is because a lot of these teams did a good job of accruing cap space during the regular season, but because they don't get that added benefit in the playoffs, that was part of the reason why they had to be smart about how they were making these acquisitions, because in previous seasons, there was no playoff salary cap. It didn't matter as long as you got through game 82 of the regular season. All bets were off, and it didn't matter how much cap charge that player had. But this year, with the changes, it made teams really think like, oh, even though we're good on the salary cap, we did a good job accruing during the regular season, we might not be compliant in the playoffs, and then it might be a situation where we have to scratch a player we don't want to scratch.
You nailed it exactly. And so even take a team like a good example would be Minnesota with Quinn Hughes, right? Like he has a $7.85 million cap hit, but he didn't start the season with them. He's been on the roster for, well, let's say about half the season, right? So he got charged to Minnesota for about half his cap charge, but in the playoffs he's his full $7.85 million cap hit. The one place where it's get a little complicated is with retention. So if a player was retained, so let's look at Edmonton. They got 2 players with retention, Connor Murphy and Jason Dickinson. So they are charged for the annual cap, but net of retention. So both of those players had 50% retained. So Edmonton will have them on the playoff cap hit at their 50%. But again, it's 50% of their full cap hit. It's not prorated for the fact that they only had them for the last 20% of the season, acquiring up the deadline. So
Exactly.
that's one little nuance on the retention piece.
Yeah, and Brian, if you scroll down too, I think at the end of this article, Hart breaks down like the example for the 2 Stanley Cup Finals last year. So the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers, and so I think one of the teams would have been fine on the salary cap. I forget which one.
Edmonton was fine because and especially because they had some injuries down the end at the end. But
Florida
would have been over the cap, and this is the final game of last year's playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, remember last year the cap was 88. Yeah. And so they had their final when they won the cup, the final game, they would have had a $93 million playoff cap under this new formula. So again, we're applying rules that weren't in place at the time,
right?
But it just shows like that roster could not have played in Game 6 when they won the cup.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about. Like they would have had to go about things a different way. Like maybe they don't make the Seth Jones acquisition. Like who knows how that everything would have played out. They might have had to get rid of a guy like I don't even know, like Mikkola or something, just to like make the numbers work. But yeah, that's what we're gonna see this year. I think a lot of teams played it conservatively, so I'm not exactly sure that any team is going to kind of run into some of these issues that they might have run into previous years. And we put on the thumbnail the 3 teams for the reason of this, right? It was Tampa and Kucherov. It's Mark Stone and Vegas. And then when Chicago won the cup, Patrick Kane and the Blackhawks, he was injured and came back. And so I think that's part of the reason why this was implemented. And then also with the rising salary cap too. So we'll see how it all plays out.
And you asked, like, are there going to be any teams that have to make tough decisions in the playoffs? I mean, if you look right now on our main teams page, you look at projected playoff cap space with the rosters that players or teams are dressing for their next game. There's no one that would be over the playoff cap. Now, again, there's players that are being rested, expensive players. But if you just do some projecting if you look at projected playoff space there and just sort by that one.
Yeah, just click projected playoff hit, right? To the right. Yeah, right there.
Sure, yeah. So no one would be over 95.5 there. And again, there's not like some of these teams have big cap hit guys that are going to come back and be ready for the playoffs. So I don't think there's going to be any teams. I mean, I think the Islanders, if everybody that was hurt came back at some point, they might have some decisions, but are they going to even make the playoffs? And if so, is everyone going to come back? But to your point, I think teams were planning for this. And so they didn't put themselves in that position. Now, let's see, as teams get more used to this and operate in the system, it's still kind of new. Like, do they push it more and make it so that they do have some tough decisions to make in the playoffs? But as of now, I don't foresee any teams that are going to have to scratch like a player they'd actually really like in the lineup just to be cap compliant in the playoffs.
Yeah, and like I mentioned too on previous episode, and it's been talked about in the industry, is like teams could theoretically dress their 3rd string goalie as their backup, makes like $775 league min as opposed to maybe a couple $1 million to just shave some money around it and see how it plays out. But yeah, unfortunately, I think as a fan, we want to see some situations where we have to kind of be creative around the numbers. But it seems like teams played this conservatively. I don't know if they played it smart per se because they aren't maximizing the talent that they're getting out of this, but they played it smart from a salary cap perspective. So we'll see how it plays out.
I think in the playoffs, though, don't we want to see like the best players on that team that are healthy playing? Yeah. There's something that seems funny about, we can't play this player in game 7 of a playoff series because he makes too much. So that was one of the things that maybe your childhood fan of me didn't like about having a playoff cap, is having teams don't get to dress their best rosters. So I think this year will be nice. We're not going to. Obviously we'll be monitoring the cap. We'll be showing the space, but the fact that teams probably aren't going to have to make a tough decision, I think, it's just good for the playoff action. And in the playoffs, it should be the one time of year where it's actually just hockey and not necessarily like, it's hard for the founder of PuckPedia to say this, but it should be the one time of the year where they're not thinking about the cap impact of things.
That's funny. Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I think playoffs is the kind of time where we're just like, dress your best guys and who cares about the number. So it'll be a nuance for fans, but we'll get used to it. Let us move on to the next topic here, and that's mostly around the entry-level contracts and the bonus overages. So Hart, I'll just kind of let you dive right into this. I know Brian has another article ready to share here. Just the difference between the A bonuses, the B bonuses, like what the maximums are, what categories, and things like that.
Yeah, so this is the time of year it becomes even more relevant or topical because we have a lot of college players signing. We have even like CHL players signing entry-level deals. And there's a lot of questions on how do the performance bonuses work. So there's only a couple types of players that are eligible for performance bonuses in the CBA. The most common one are entry-level deals. So that's the player's first contract. And there's a couple types of bonuses. There's some that you see are games played bonuses, and those are basically only if the player isn't making the maximum entry-level salary and signing bonus. So those would be not your top picks. It'd be kind of later picks. They might be signing for the league minimum, but with a bigger signing bonus, and then they have a little bit of a games played bonus. The most common bonuses are these A and B bonuses. So A are the first kind of batch of bonuses. For player signing now, the maximum is up to $1 million, and there's basically a menu of things that can be included on it. And for each achievement, the player gets 250,000. Previously, the limit was 850, and so for each one, it would be 212,500. And we still have some players this season that are going to earn like 212.5 per bonus, but going forward, almost all of them are going to be now at 250 per bonus. And so let's say a player only has, in their contract, they negotiated it's only for 600,000 of A bonuses. Then basically the first two bonuses that they achieved, they would get 250. And then that third one, they would just get up to their limit of 600,000. And you can even have something like Lane Hudson has in his contract. Not only is there a limit per season in A bonuses, but there's a limit over the whole contract. And so this season, even though he's going to hit 4, he would have earned his full $1 million. He's only going to be able to earn a lot less than that because he's going to hit the cap for his overall contract. So teams can be creative. And if you scroll down here, Brian, like these categories that you see, these are, like I said, it's a menu of options. So most contracts include all of these categories that a player could earn bonuses for, but they don't have to include this. And so like if you just stop there for a second, one of them is like top 3 plus minus among forwards on the team. Some teams cut that out. Some teams don't include that. And so it's not an automatic that would be on there. But like I said, most players that get A bonuses are higher draft picks, and therefore they're also they have the leverage to command like everything on what I'd call the menu of AA items. But again,
imagine if Celebrini has that in his. That's an automatic.
Yeah. Well, Celebrini's going to max out for sure. He's going to hit all of these. So the most common ones, so there was like for forwards, 20 goals, 35 assists, 60 points, top 6 in ice time among forwards, top 3 plus minus, or 0.73 points per game. And then if they make the all rookie team. So again, these kind of players, higher end players might max them all out, like a Celebrini, for example, or Demidov is going to get a lot of them this year. And if you go to defensemen, it's 10 goals, 25 assists, 40 points, top 4 in ice time. Schaefer's getting all of these as well, right? So, where we have to look at it closely is, it could be a player that, doesn't put up a defenseman doesn't put up a lot of points or anything, but he snuck into like the top 2 among block shots, and maybe he got the ice time, like total ice time. And so he might earn some of these bonuses. So if a player has performance bonuses, basically the first $1 million are A bonuses, and anything over that would be B bonuses. Excuse me. And B bonuses can be up to $2.5 million now. And so B bonuses are typically, it can be tweaked, but almost everyone I've seen it's like an all or nothing. If a player hits for any of these, they get the full amount of B bonuses in their contract. And so that would basically be finishing in the top 10 in any major category, or winning a major trophy, which does not include, it doesn't include Rookie of the Year, the Calder. So it's like, it's earning the kind of big boy trophies, the Hart or the Selke or Richard, Conn Smythe, Norris.
I see a lot of Conn Smythe bonuses, which are pretty funny.
Yeah. And there's a reason for that. We could touch on that. But so basically to get a B bonus, and so Celebrini is definitely going to get this, and Schaefer's going to get this because they're going to finish in the top 10 in either forward or defenseman in those categories. And they'll also potentially be first or second team All-Stars, for example, right?
For both of them, Hart, are they both maxed out on their A and B bonuses across the duration of their ELC, or do they have Hudson where it's a cap throughout?
No, they're first overall picks. They get everything, right?
Yeah.
And if you look, it's typically the first overall pick gets everything possible, and then it starts to really drop off from there. And actually, if you look at our draft pages, if you look at a completed draft class, we show the entry-level deals all right on that page. You can scroll down and you can see, like, even looking at the AAVs when it starts dropping because players have less and less bonuses.
James Hagen's just signed yesterday too, so he got some bonuses, I believe, in his deal.
Yeah, he got. So the one thing is, for these players that sign late, the bonuses have to be achievable. So these A bonuses, you can't have if you're signing right now with only a few games left. And so, and same with the B, like he's not going to finish in the top 10 in anything. The only one he's actually eligible for was the Conn Smythe, right? And
I think
so it's thrown in
Conn
there.
Smythe too.
It's thrown in there in sometimes it's thrown in there because then well, it's thrown in there because there's rules about variability between how much a contract can go up from year to year. And so because he got the full $1 million in year 2 and 3, it needed to have a higher number in year 1, right? And so again, that's like the only bonus he was eligible for signing at this point in the season.
It's basically a throwaway, but it benefits them in years 2 and 3 to get
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's how the structure is. People often say, when we tweet, this guy signed and he's got $1 million in a bonus, people ask, oh, how do we know what the bonuses are for? How can we find out? And I always say, well, go to this page. We know exactly what they're for. I mean, it's possible that, a couple of those menu items aren't on there, but almost all players that have A's would have those categories on them. So that's what the bonuses are for. I think that leads us to the next topic, which is going to be coming up here pretty soon, our bonus overages, and when we figure out what players earned for this season.
Yeah, why don't you just keep us diving in? And that's why you guys go to PuckPedia, right? Like a lot of these some of these other salary cap sites have no idea what the bonus structures are, which A bonuses the players have for how much, and that's why you come here to get all that good information.
So, I think we've talked about this a few times, but the way that bonuses work, that they do not get charged to the team during the season. So like Celebrini, Schaefer, it was only their signing bonus and base salary and their cap hit number. All these performance bonuses were not included in the cap hit during the season. The way that performance bonuses work is at the very end of the season, once the regular season is done, then it's calculated how much players have earned in bonuses, and whether it's entry-level bonuses or 35 plus bonuses, whatever type of bonus, any performance bonus gets added to the end of the season cap number. And then if that total cap number is over the cap in the season 95.5, that excess is a overage, which is a cap charge for the following season. So let's say a team finished with $95 million of like a final cap hit for the season, and they had a $600,000 in bonuses earned. Then they would be 100,000 over the $95.5 million cap, and they would therefore have a bonus overage for next season. So yeah,
quick question.
Yeah, please.
For that, does that have to do with where they finish on, game 82 of 82, and it's based off of accrual? So like a team that, if you look at all the contracts, might be a $90 million team, but because they accrue throughout the regular season, they're only an $80 million team. Is it calculated on the $80 million number or the $90 million number?
It's the 80. It's the final number that they finish. So the salary cap is it's basically 1 day worth out of every player's cap hit that was on the roster each day of the season. And when you add all those up at the end of the season, that's the team's final cap hit number. So yeah, they might have had a lot less cap hit for part of the season. Then by the end, they traded for a bunch of players, they're sitting with 30 guys on the roster, and the annual cap hit of the roster right now is way higher. All that matters at the end of the season is when you add up each day's worth all throughout the season.
So like non-playoff teams, example, might do some cap gymnastics towards the end of the season because they know they're going to be, let's say, $2 million in overages, and they only have $1 million in cap space. So they try to clear $1 million extra by the end of the season to not have to pay overages for next year.
Yeah, and we talked about this actually on our trade deadline preview show.
Maybe that's
Emily
why
Kaplan.
Luke's got surgery today.
No, he's already he's on his big contract already. He doesn't have bonuses, and so
no, I mean because they might not want to pay the Dadonov overage for next season.
Well, that's not going to save them any money under the cap, right? He's still being charged against the cap. But we talked about this on our deadline show with Emily Kaplan, like Florida. I thought they're moving Jeff Petrie for sure because he was going to hit another performance bonus when he hit the next games played threshold, and they did. And to me, it wasn't even just about what they got for him. Is that why? When he hits the next game played threshold, why get charged for another more of an overage, right? So definitely you can see that. That's why I was so surprised New Jersey dressed Dadonov for that big 20th game, because that's another $250,000 that's now going to be an overage for next season. So teams that use LTIR and then by definition finished over the cap, that means every bonus that's earned is definitely going to be an overage for the next season.
It's like automatically applied, right?
Yeah. And so we're the numbers aren't finalized yet because the teams still have a few days left in the season and guys can still earn some bonuses, but just are doing our preliminary work. There's going to be less bonus overages for next season than there were, this year and the year before. And that's, I think, in part because the cap was higher. Teams had some more space.
How many bonus overages were there last season?
We have to
give or take.
I think there was 11 last season. Let's see. Can we get research on that?
You are the research.
Oh. Yeah, I have to pull out. I think it was 11.
Yeah, it'll be definitely less this year with the rising cap. And even if teams are like over, like I think it's less impactful because how many of these teams next season are going to be salary cap ceiling teams? Like you're not really sure that there's going to be too many of those.
So it was 11.
There we go.
And then
PuckPedia research.
the year before was 15, the year before was 14, and then the year before 12. So you can really see like when the cap hadn't risen for many years, right? You had more teams doing those performance bonus laden deals for players and using LTIR. You got to see more overages. Now we've had 2 years of decent cap growth. We're still had a lot of teams that use LTIR at times, but I think also teams weren't so desperate to, for these players that were previously injured or 35 plus players, giving those big bonuses and putting themselves where they're going to definitely have an overage. So yeah, we'll have less this year. I think this year, again, we'll have to see, but I'm going to guess there's, 7 or 8 or so. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll see how it plays out. Like Hart mentioned, once the game 82 is over for all the teams, we'll know immediately after kind of what those bonus overages will be. But good insight. I think it's good that fans kind of understand that. And, some fans might not understand that they're already kind of they're not at the full cap ceiling because they have, between $200,000 to $1 million to $2 million in bonus overages for the next season. So good insight there. Why don't we wrap up the episode today, Hart, with the draft simulator? Brian has developed, I think, a nice graphic for us or a visual to show us, the simulator results here.
Wow.
So as the NHL, PuckPedia is also rigged for the New York Rangers. So
yes, Keith has been rigging it for his beloved Rangers.
The Rangers have won the first 2 draft lotteries here, and then Seattle won the second lottery in the first episode, and then Vancouver last episode. So why don't we pull up the simulator here? Let's see how the standings have. Oh, Brian's just going to run it right away. I love that.
Brian's got a plane to catch or something.
We got the Canucks winning the first
wow.
lottery here. So they had the best odds based on the standings right now. I think they've already clinched the worst record in the NHL. So they're going to have the best odds at the NHL entry level to get the first overall pick in the draft. And in this scenario, they won the first lottery. So let's see who wins the second lottery, who's going to move up, if anyone's going to move down. The Toronto Maple Leafs.
Would be interesting.
Huge for the Leafs because then they would be able to keep that pick, get an elite player that they can kind of use to build around. Maybe they want to do something crazy and move that pick for a couple superstar players. Probably unlikely, but we'll see how that plays out. But in this scenario with the top 5 pick being protected, they would actually keep this pick, and then 27, I believe, they would have the option to give it to Boston or Philly, or what was the condition on that?
Well, it depends if the next one is top 10 or not, but they would basically, they're out their next 2 picks if they keep this one. And It's just a matter of who gets what pick, depending on where they finish next season.
So Leafs fans would I think this would be a good scenario for the Leafs because they would get an elite player knowing that their next 2 picks are they're not going to keep. But I think that it'll be interesting. But I think go back, Brian. Can you go back to the results too? So Florida would have the 7th overall pick there, so they would actually keep that pick because it's top 10 protected from the Seth Jones trade. And then what's the condition with that? Is there any condition with the Blues pick, or they just get Detroit's?
Oh, it's just a traded pick. It's the only other one that's been traded. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would just be flops. That would stink for Detroit because in this scenario, they're not making the playoffs and they got to give away their first round pick.
Yeah, that was a good pick. They got moved.
But we'll see how it plays out. Entry level draft is end of June. I'm excited for it. And you can go to puckpedia.com. If you go to PuckGM, you can run these simulations. Thanks to our friends over at CoolBet as well for helping us get everything in order. But that's all the time we have for you guys today. If you haven't already gone to the PuckPedia YouTube page, subscribe. We had a great episode this past week with John Mattis from The Score. We met him out in Denver at the Halo conference, and he moderated a panel with Mike Kelly, Megan Chaika, and Aaron Ward. So we talk about that. He had some good stories about some early days of him kind of in the locker room and a funny story with Ray Ferraro. And then we touch on the biggest surprises of the NHL season. But Hart, any final words before we wrap it up here?
No, we got basically a week left in the season, and then let's get going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm excited. We'll see how all these matchups get
Yeah.
sorted out. As Hart mentioned, we only have one really in place, so it'll be good jockeying of position for the last few games of the NHL season. But thanks for taking the time, everyone. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube page, follow along on X and Instagram, and make sure you're going to puckpedia.com to get all your contract, salary cap information, and everything else, that all the new site features that are getting rolled out seems like every day at this point.
Thanks.
PuckPedia.com.